totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to the Booked on Rock podcast. Make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star review. The website, bookedonrock.com, has a listing of all the major platforms where you can listen and subscribe, and also give your 5-star review. John Bouvoir is our guest this week to talk about his book, Bet My Soul on Rock and Roll, Diary of a Black Punk Icon. John joined the Plasmatics in 1979, playing bass and keyboards for the most notorious band to emerge out of the New York City punk scene. By 1982, he was a member of Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul, a retro rock revival act headed by Steven Van Zandt. The Disciples of Soul videos played on MTV during the network's earliest years, making John one of the first black recording artists to cross the startup music channel's color line. John went on to become a multi-platinum artist, producer, and songwriter. Bet My Soul on Rock and Roll with John Ostrosky follows John's ride through the American music industry, detailing his encounters with rock stars such as Bruce Springsteen, Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, and Lita Ford, as well as the actor Sylvester Stallone, the billionaire executive Richard Branson, and even Donald Trump. John also considers the manner in which his Haitian heritage has shaped his public image, his music, and his role as an activist for the dispossessed and the poor. Guitar World featured John on its list of the 50 most influential black rockers of all time. His worldwide music catalog, currently administered by Universal Music Publishing, contains over 600 published titles. As an artist, producer, and songwriter, he sold in excess of 40 million records. We talked to him from his home in Bonita Springs, Florida. As always, we've put together a playlist of the music that we talk about in the episode. Just head over to the show notes page to give it a listen. Now on to our interview with John Bouvoir. John Bouvoir, thanks so much for being on the podcast. This is a pleasure.
Oh, same here. Nice to be here.
What an amazing career you've had. I mean, this is something that I'm sure fans have been waiting for a while. You got so many great stories. What was it that inspired you to finally get started on the book?
Well, it's been on my mind actually for some years now, probably 10, 15 years that people have been saying, oh, you should write a book. You should write a book. And you always think it's time, but just life gets in the way and I just didn't get around to it. But I was still always putting down notes, so I just, every time I remembered a story, whatever it might be, Stringfellows and, in England and this happened, and I just jot it down and I put it in a Word doc. And I just kept on doing that. So that finally, when COVID hit, it just so happened that that's when I got offered a publishing deal, So I was like, oh, okay, this might be good timing because then I'll have time to do this book because all our gigs are getting canceled. And it was good. It was smart. It was a good time. It just worked out. And I had all those notes to go back to, which, believe me, were a help. Because trying to remember everything is really difficult, especially when you get into like dates and, just, how it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe
yeah.
you don't.
Yeah. I mean, that a lot of people will just write things down, keep a diary, but not all of
That's
them.
basically
and so,
it.
Yeah. And so if you don't do that, it's gone, and then you have to rely on other people, and that's never good, right? You don't know if they're going to remember it.
Exactly. I've called some people sometimes, like friends, and I'd say, oh, you remember that thing that we did on that day? And I'd say, yeah, we did this, and that. And I said, so you sure? And he said, well, don't quote me on it.
Yeah. And also the life of a musician, it's like a blur.
Yeah, it can be that way. It can. It's, I don't have the greatest memory. I mean, it depends, it depends for what, but certain things I just can't remember for the life of me. It's crazy. I guess I'm not getting any younger.
Yeah. Well, this book tells the whole story of your life in music, beginning with your teen years. By the time you were 15, Your dad realized you were serious about music. Before we get to his reaction to you wanting to become a musician, when did you realize you were serious about music? Because you write about having a Kiss poster on your wall and what your grandmother thought of Gene Simmons, which is a great story.
Yes. Well, I thought about it early on, probably since I was 11, 12. I already kind of started getting the itch for it. I always liked music. I was singing in the choir and all kinds of stuff. And then I started, of course, the normal stuff in school, the recorder. And then I wanted to move to, saxophone. But by that time, I was already, had started playing drums. just something I just picked up. And I really loved that. And I played all these rock records, Eric Clapton, everything that was happening at the time, Rush, all these crazy bands. And from there I went to bass and then that's it. So I knew very early on, probably, I'm already 10, 11 years old, that I wanted to do music.
Do you have a favorite Kiss record? Because I'm a huge Kiss fan, so I'm just curious. What's your favorite Kiss album?
Oh, God. I know I sound like really like diplomatic what I'm saying, but I don't have one as a favorite. There's just, I'm more of a song guy, to be honest with you, even though there are some records that really stand out, some albums, if you know what I mean, because the way they're crafted and because it's all encompassing. But I don't really I just like a lot of Kiss stuff, going back to Detroit Rock City and all those songs, which is how I started playing to those songs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I like a lot of the later stuff. I like the stuff I was involved in. I like a lot of things I'm not involved in.
Well,
Tears are falling.
I can't wait to ask you about that stuff, man. Yeah, that's I love the '80s Kiss too. So we're definitely gonna get to that. Now, you were born in Chicago, and then you spent most of your summers in Haiti in the early days.
Haiti and France. Haiti and France.
Yes.
Because I had two different sides, which I get into more in the book. It's pretty interesting, that part. It's just a different, upbringing for both sides. Believe it or not, both my mother and father each had presidents in their, in their ancestry going back, not that long, actually. So that was a bit crazy. But spending time in the two different places, still my father was more like, I don't know, what's the right word? From a different side of Haiti. So my mom's side was more shishi, you know what I mean? And her father was an ambassador to France, So whenever I'd go spend time with them in France, it was a very straight-laced, manners, really, tight upbringing kind of thing. And in Haiti, I was, dancing around with chickens and in my uncle's backyard at voodoo ceremonies and playing drums.
Yeah. Wild. So your dad was not on board with your career choice, but he loved music. He exposed you to a lot of music. Can you talk about that and also the ultimatum he gave you and your response to that ultimatum when you were a teenager?
You're right about that. My dad was an avid music lover. He played accordion, actually, and he played and he had a very, very good voice, and harmonica. And he had a very good voice. Every once in a while, he'd just pop it out in the kitchen and start messing around, kind of, but you could hear he had like this great baritone kind of voice, really rich. Anyways, but he liked the idea of me doing music. He thought, oh, wow, that's great. And he liked the fact that I started everything so young and I was an entrepreneur in his eyes. And he said, well, okay, he's on a good track here. But then it just got to a point where he felt it was just taking up too much time. Like I was, already by 14 years old, I was already playing at night. I was staying out till 4 a.m, playing in a club, coming home, running to school. And one day he just came home and he just said, you know what, as of tomorrow, that's it. All music stops or you go. That was the end of that. And he didn't feel that it was a career because, to be honest with you, in reality, no other Haitian had ever succeeded in music until I came along. It was just something that was unheard of, you know what I mean? It wasn't looked at as a career, in Haiti. It's like doctors, lawyers, try to get to Harvard, that was it, as Haitian parents, just trying to get your kids to get as far up the pole as you can. And he definitely didn't think music was the way.
It's understandable. It's not as if he didn't believe in you, but he was just worried. He didn't want to see his son, struggling to make ends meet.
And playing in the subway.
Yeah. Now, your mom, what about your mom? How did she feel about your decision to make music your career?
Well, moms are like, I don't know if my mom ever really looked at me as talented, if you know what I'm saying. I can remember once telling my mom, oh, I'm on this record. And it's like, legendary voices. She looked at me and said, like, come on. It was like, that's a joke, But so she was, she wouldn't have prevented me from doing it the way he did. Okay. But she didn't really believe it either. But she supported me. Even after I left the house, I didn't speak to my dad, for God, till my first solo hit, to be honest with you. Wow. So that's quite a few years. Not one word from him. Wow. But my mom, I kept in touch with, and she always was there and supportive. And she was like, hey, do what, you chose or whatever was chosen for you to do. And I just wish you the best of luck with it.
There's a great moment with your dad later towards the end of his life that was just a tearjerker, and you included in the book. But boy, that long, huh? So not until your first solo
record.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big decision you made, and you stuck with it. It paid off, of course. And thankfully, and I'm happy to hear that you did have that reconnection with your dad. But I want to ask you about the summers in Haiti. There's a funny parrot named Jacko, and then the voodoo ceremonies, and then there's adventures through mountains on a horse. I mean, this is great stuff.
Haiti's a really beautiful place. It's it's mysterious. It's dark in ways. I know people know there's poverty on there, but there's a lot of beauty in that country. The mountains are they're just fabulous. To go, you go up the mountains, you're literally above the clouds at times, and it's just something that's just surreal. And so those days we do everything. We just walk through the woods with friends and I, and you want to rent a horse or something. There'd be a horse there. You just grab a couple of horses. Everybody knows whose it is. You come back a week later, pay them $10. We go taking the corn. People would grill corns for you as you're walking through the woods. Different people from different little villages up there, and it was just I really enjoyed that time. And like staying at my uncle's house was a trip because he's a voodoo priest, and I don't know if you were aware, but he was the subject of the film Serpent in the Rainbow.
Get out! No.
Yeah. Yes, and also the film. So the book Serpent in the Rainbow was about scientists who went to Haiti to try to discover this zombie powder, which he was told to have. So they went down there to spend time with them to see if they could use it for space travel. That's the real story. And then the film was fictionalized, and turned into Serpent and the Rainbow. It was, more fiction, a little crazier, but it's still the subject in that book is, and actually looks a lot like my uncle. And the girl voodoo priestess was his daughter, which is also a voodoo priestess.
Wow.
So I grew up with all of that and watching a lot of voodoo ceremonies and watching people get possessed and, go into the ocean and not come back and, all kinds of stuff. It was a crazy childhood. And, the voodoo is very deep, if you get into that whole thing. But if you look up the name Max Beauvoir, you'll see a lot of write-ups from New York Times to The Guardian to, every major magazine in the world that talks about how they feel that he brought the whole zombie movement to light, and a lot of things that he's, credited with doing. So that was very interesting.
And that's a Wes Craven film. That was a big film.
A big film.
Did they talk to him to get stories, to get even the actors?
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, to get an idea. Yeah. Bill Pullman was in that.
Yeah, Bill Pullman spent time with him. I knew the whole story. Funny thing is that I ended up writing a song called Here She Comes for another Bill Pullman film years later. But as far as, they went down there and spent time with them. I had spoken to everybody, to Wes Craven, because I did another thing with Wes Craven called Shocker, so we got to speak a little bit about the Serpent and the Rainbow. But yeah, he went down there, spent time with him. He said it was just mesmerizing, and there's also a cool story in the book, which I won't get into now, about my band Voodoo X going to Haiti to shoot a video during a real voodoo ceremony. And that was quite the experience for the whole crew from Germany and the US, the band members. It's a pretty trippy chapter in the book.
Is that video on YouTube? Can people check that out?
Yes. Yep. It's called Voodoo X, Voodoo Queen.
Your time living in Queens, New York was important in terms of creativity and music discovery, too. Can you talk about that?
Well, when I wrote that, I was thinking that when I was, that was even before I moved to Long Island, where I really grew up. So let's say it was before fourth grade, right? So at that time, I already remember myself in the basement of our house. I used to love 45s. I had a little 45, record deck downstairs, little speaker and stuff. And I just listen to all these 45s. I don't remember what they were anymore, but, Bride, Captain Bride, and maybe that wasn't even out yet, but whatever was out at the time. And I used to spend a lot of time, jumping around, singing to them. So that was already, before I even got to that age, that I was already, into that and obviously attracted to it. And that happened in Queens. So I think that was the beginning of it all.
unfortunately, you had to deal with racism growing up, and a lot of it was as a result of ignorance. What they saw in the movies tainted their view of blacks, so you were determined to show people that blacks weren't all thieves and criminals. How much did that experience affect you, particularly as you get into your adult years in the music industry? Did it give you thicker skin? Did it help you to prepare for the challenges you'd face coming up in the music business?
Yeah, it really did. It was a very powerful lesson early on, I would say, because I think my father was right about that. He's right about a lot of things. But in this case, when I first moved out to Long Island, I can remember when I lived in Queens, there were a lot of blacks, everything was fine. But my dad felt that it was just too, I hate to say too like streetish for us. It just felt like Haitian Americans have a bit of an upbringing from American blacks, so it's a different, we speak French, you do different things, you have a different, it's just different completely. So my father felt that it was a bad influence to stay there, and he felt that he wanted to live way out in Long Island where there were only whites. But that's what he felt. He felt that it would be a better, just a better upbringing for me, and better education, and just better models, role models, to be honest, at the time, yep. Because I was fighting for lunch money and stuff in Queens, every day. It was a mess. So we ended up moving all the way out on Long Island. So basically what ended up happening was my father always said, being the only blacks, out here, you have a responsibility. And it's to basically pave the way for other blacks. And the way you're going to do that is by being a role model. So, when you go to a restaurant or you go here, you have manners, you do this, you let people, let people know you're a gentleman, and, use all the good manners that we teach you and things, so that people look at you and say, whatever, honesty, whatever it might be, character traits that make people say, hey, I've got a black friend and he's pretty cool. You know what I mean? And so from there, that leads to 10 people thinking that, 20 people. And then before you know it, you have a whole area, which is what ended up happening, thinking that you're a really, cool guy, and he's playing rock and roll and he plays sports, and wow, this is a great representation of blacks. But of course, that, like you said, you need a thick skin for that, because you had a lot of people who were ignorant. You had to listen to name calling every day. You went to a movie and people screaming, nig and all kinds of bullshit you had to listen to on a daily basis, while you're going through this transformation, if you know what I'm saying. So, and that went on for years, and it went on all the way through the Plasmatics, because I was the first one to get a blonde mohawk. So, blacks at the time felt, oh God, he's got a blonde mohawk, going against the roots of our people, our captors. How dare he get blonde hair? And then now I go out and like every soccer player, football player, basketball player, like I all have blonde mohawks. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's a good thing, because in my eyes, that's exactly what my dad was talking about, that you paved the way. So let's say by us being with the Plasmatics, and I don't know if you remember the Plasmatics, for a good 2 years, we just dominated American television.
Yeah.
It was just, it was crazy. All the, all mainstream channels. So, that resonates, because all of a sudden, 10 other artists, Janet Jackson, this one, Mr. T comes out, that one comes out, and all these other ones all start to do the same thing. And that resonates to all their fans. And then that resonates to more. And before you know it, you have what we have now. We have millions of blacks running around with blonde, purple, green hair without a thought.
I remember in the late 80s, Doug Pinnick from King's X had the mohawk, didn't he?
And Doug Pinnick, actually, funny thing is I met him for the first time a few years ago. And I remember we were sitting there with Eddie Trunk, and he said to me, I just want to let you know, John, I got it all from you. I said, what? Really? And then he went and posted it on Facebook, and then he put it in his film.
Oh, that's great.
And, it was great. I was honored. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, Corey from Living Color told me that. A lot of people, band guys that I know, put guys in their band with mohawks, Michael Jackson. So, it's all part of setting examples in a way. And I actually have a chapter in the book called, race role models and setting examples, because I think that that's just something that's really important in life. And it's not just about a black guy. It's anybody. It can be a black guy, it can be a Spanish guy, an Indian guy, girls with red hair who everybody think are wild, no matter who, everybody thinks they're wild because somebody set that precedent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Great. That's a great attitude, man. Great attitude.
Do you know
I
what
love
I'm
that.
saying?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
How about your experience with the great Gary U.S. Bonds? You got close with him and his family. Can you talk about those days? You got to watch and meet with some legends, Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry. Yeah. He also had some friends in the mafia, right?
Oh, everybody's. Of course, not something you actually talk about. But yeah. You know what I mean. But he was. He's a great guy. I know him now. I spoke to him actually not more than 3 months ago. We just reconnected and started talking. He called me the same. Hey, boo boo, how you doing, boo boo? But he was a big catalyst for my whole thing because he's the first one who took me out on the road. Underage. Put me in charge of his bands and all his stuff and just said, boo boo, it's up to you. You do it. And that was a big, that was a big responsibility for one thing, to have at that age. And it was great that he believed in me and believed in my talents at that point to make me do that because, musicians he had, were, guys from Berkeley and, they weren't like just nobodies. They were pretty talented guys. But he had a certain way that he wanted things. And the funny thing is, by touring with him and doing all those Dick Clark shows, and that was a great thing because those Dick Clark shows were coliseums and all these big venues around America, and they had everyone, So you have, like I said, Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, the Platters, the Flamingos, It was a whole big review. So you got to spend time with all of these people. And it was, so at that age, it was a great experience. So I was 15, 16 around that time. It was just traveling all around America, playing coliseums. It was pretty good.
I was going to say, you're just a kid. You formed a band Topaz, performed with the Flamingos all before finishing high school. And this is part of your story where you prove just how serious you are about making it. You spent your nights on the streets of New York, sometimes in cardboard boxes. I'm curious as to what goes through your mind in those days. Was there ever a point where you thought about giving it up? Going back home,
yes.
Or you did?
Yeah, it was. And the funny thing is that I almost thought about giving up before I got to that exact point, because the funny thing is, after playing with Gary, the Flamingos, everything, I actually moved to New Jersey for a while. And I was like, I got an apartment there. And I said, you know what? Maybe I should consider going to college and, getting a backup just in case, blah, blah, blah. And I started thinking about doing that. And then one day I came home, and my apartment building had burned down with everything gone. And then that time I had a little thing going. I was all right, but everything was gone. It was just like, I got even more discouraged, but I found myself in the streets of New York. And I said, music is what I want to do. It's really what I want to do. So I'm going to just go for it. At those points but you do wonder, what am I doing? Hey, I should have went back to school. Maybe I should do this. Am I being stupid? Because you're on your own. It's not a lot of people at your age that you can talk to that are saying, oh, yeah, I'm doing it, so come along. It's like you're on your own, and it's, you get scared. But the funny thing is when you're young like that, you're just so, I don't know, it's a power that you have inside you and a belief that I don't know where it comes from, to be honest with you, because when I think back, I say to myself, so how did your mind put, living on Long Island, going to school with becoming a rock star? Like, how did you even come up with that? It's the most far-fetched thing you could ever think of.
But as we know, your luck would change. You discover a band called the Plasmatics. Can you talk about when you first saw the band? What was your first reaction?
I thought they were wild and cool. It's like, actually during those days of living, in the streets in New York, I ended up joining this band called NYN. The real name was New York Niggers, actually.
Wow.
It was a crazy name. Punk was at its peak at this time. And I said, and I went and auditioned for them as a lead singer, and they took me on. So we ended up going to open for the Plasmatics on Long Island. I think it was my father's place. And this was at the beginning of their career. So it was, a small audience and stuff, but I got to see it. It was super wild. It was like the band was just crazy. I said, wow, look at these guys. That's crazy. And didn't think much of it besides that. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, I see an ad that they're looking for a bass player. And I said, I play bass. Check it out. So I gave a call to the guy. He remembered meeting me when we played together and the whole thing. And I went through this whole, audition process and stuff. And then finally they said, "You're the guy." And it was just right at the right time. I was a real rebel. My look, everything was just different, but I had no place to go and be. And the Plasmatics were that home that I was looking for.
What I thought was cool, that the band's manager was upfront and honest with you about you're not going to get rich quick. And he told you that.
Well, he did. That's right. And, but he did, he was pretty confident about where the band was going to go. You know what I mean? And I liked his confidence. He really seemed to know what he was doing. And he was, one of the real confident guy. He was like, this is what's going to happen, but we're going to have to do this, and that to begin. So basically get ready to starve.
And this is pre-internet days.
Which we did.
Yeah. Yes.
Which we did for a while.
What do you recall? Like, what were the meals like on a day-to-day basis? Did you eat 3 meals a day in those days?
No. Basically, I went to, first of all, the Plasmatics was set up like a 9-to-5 job. So we rehearsed every day. I don't remember if we did, I don't think we did weekends or we took one day off or something, but it was 5 days a week for sure. And it was 9 to 5 and we'd just be in there sometimes later, and he looked at it like that, like it's a job. So we weren't getting paid any money. So we'd have to go to all these gigs with no money, so literally for me, I was living in a motel. Well, I was going from different places at this point, but I moved into this motel. I had some deal with them someplace on Route 3 in New Jersey. And I would literally wait till the maids were cleaning the rooms and go into the rooms to try to find change or dollar bills that people left on the beds. So I could run across the street to this diner and go buy these corn muffins. I can still taste it now, which I thought were the best thing. So that's what I was eating for the most part. Or I remember there was a place right downstairs from Plasmatics that made pork chop sandwiches. So, there's like, I don't know, $2, maybe $1, something like this, pork chop on 2 pieces of bread. I used to love those things. I still make them because of that time. It's crazy.
Is this late 70s, around 78, 79, you meet the band?
Yeah, right. Yep. 79, 80. 79
Okay.
Going into 80.
Wendy O. Williams is remembered as one of the most authentic artists in rock history, a legendary figure in punk rock. What was your first impression of her?
She looked great to me. She was, I loved her energy, and you could tell she was dedicated. It was, everybody was dedicated. It was a real, people really into what they were doing and into the roles, and like the roles that they each had. It's not like it was a manipulated role, but it's who they were. They were really, if you know what I'm saying. Wendy was too, and she worked out every day. She ran 5 miles. Very different than what you would have thought, because you'd think, oh, it's a bunch of drug addict rock and rollers. That wasn't the case. And everybody was cool. But I loved her. We got along really well right from the beginning. She was just a cool chick. She just and she was funny, and she was amused at the fact that I had a French name and Beauvoir. She loved to say it and play with it. And
you said she was a bit shy around you. What was she like off stage? Was she any different off stage than she was on?
Well, she could be. When I say a little shy, she was, I think, always, it's kind of weird to say Wendy's reserved, because she's far from reserved. But to tell you the truth, it's not like she'd come running into the room blasting things like you'd see her do on stage. She was very kind of quiet. She did what she had to do. She did her rehearsal. She did her thing. She had something to say. She'd say it, but she wasn't, she'd make a joke, whatever it might be, or we did a lot of that. I know we laughed a lot.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. If you're a publisher or author of a book on rock and you want to be on the Booked on Rock podcast, contact us through our website, bookedonrock.com, or send an email to the Booked on Rock podcast @gmail.com. You started wearing helmets on stage because things could get pretty dangerous. Is there a particular show that stands out for you? Like, what was the craziest thing you remember her doing on stage or you doing on stage?
There were a few things, but I'd say the Pier show, where she jumped out of her car 50 yards out, and the car went into the stage, and all the equipment and everything else went into the Hudson River. That was pretty crazy.
I love it.
That was one of the Yeah, I was one of the craziest shows. And I would say that the helmets were necessary because, at that time, things weren't as organized as they are now. We had pyro guys who just, they were great, but they just throw gas into that thing. Who knows how much they put in today or tomorrow. So that hood that would fly up, from the car as the last thing when we played some of the bigger shows, you never knew where it would land. It could land, it could go up 50 feet, go up 100 feet, it could go up 10, who knows? So one time it went up so high and the flames actually burnt the curtains up at Calderon Theater. Remember the Calderon Theater on Long Island?
Yes, I've heard of it. Never been.
Okay, it was a big theater, big, beautiful theater. Nice curtains on the top. The hood went up so high. The curtains went on flame. People are running out of the venue. It was insane, We had things like that happen.
There's the crazy night after a show in Milwaukee at a club called the Palms. You guys could see right away that the cops are just waiting for a reason to take you down. They'd seen your performance on TV, the TV show Fridays, and they couldn't wait for a reason to arrest you. What went down that night?
Basically, we were beat up. Wendy, we were beat up, thrown in jail, all kinds of things. It ended up all over the press, actually, People magazine and everything, because, 3 detectives over there kind of took liberties and punched Wendy on the ground, and Uncle tried to feel her up, all kinds of things. It's just that we'd always have problems on the road with the Plasmatics because we'd always have officials, whether it be the vice squad or fire department, they'd always come to the shows because they were trying to either get a payoff or try to figure out what the hell we're doing. You know what I mean? Because they were kind of fueled by the conservatives in the neighborhoods. But but that's kind of it was a lot. It was a dark night, bad night. We ended up in a big lawsuit that went on for a long time, and crazy details happened, like the detectives disappeared, before the trial, all kinds of. It was a very strange occurrence, the whole thing. All of that. We've got the band really captured national attention with that Pier show. Because unexpectedly, this was a free show that we put on at the Pier, which actually started a whole series of Pier shows after that, by the way, But that first show was put on kind of just like as a promotional thing. We wanted to make a film with this event of the car going into Hudson River and her jumping out of it and everything else. But we didn't expect that all the news channels would be there and probably 10,000 or more people would show up. And we only had permits for a few thousand. So that happening, all of a sudden, the next day, we were the commercial for Eyewitness News, and all these other news channels around the U.S., and it just blew things up, and it started to sell out all the shows. And then also Fridays was another big occurrence around that same time, or around the same, same time frame with the years. And so some of these shows, real Tom Schneider show, which we did twice, which is a record thing. So between those shows and all the news and everything, it really put the band out there on a very mainstream level.
What was that like for you at that point? Now you're getting known, like you say, it's national. You got the footage that's playing around the country. Do people start recognizing you on the street more?
Absolutely. It was crazy. When we were in New York at that point, I was living in New York at that time. And literally, it was a point where the manager was like, don't go out anywhere. Don't go see anybody. We only go out to things if we do it together. Or, he was urging us not to go out and, go hanging out in clubs and doing all that kind of stuff, because everywhere you went, you were recognized. And the funny thing is, it didn't matter if it was a grandmother, kids, that's what I thought was interesting, because it transcended music. You know what I mean? People knew you as a character. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember the show, but they finally came up with a little Saturday morning cartoon. They had my image, so people were so in tune with the thing that when they saw one of us on the street, they'd be like, it was crazy. It was, for a while there, it was, it was okay. I mean, that wasn't a bad thing, but it was, it was interesting.
Did it freak you out a little bit when total strangers are coming up to you as if they know you, but you don't know who the heck they are?
No, it didn't. It didn't, because I guess maybe from the playing before, I didn't have, like, we could carry your sponsors. It's not like I had personal fans or anything like that, but you already started to get a feeling for what that's all about. So I liked it, to be honest with you. A lot of musicians say, "Oh God, I don't want to be people, coming up to me or this and my privacy." But they say that you should pick another job.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is what this is about. So I personally enjoyed it. Yeah, and then it also changed. It started to change people's thinking slowly too, about what I was telling you about people saying, blacks telling me about my hair and roots and all that stuff. When they start seeing that you're all over TV and things are happening, all of a sudden it changes from wanting to kick you out of the building to wanting your autographs.
Crazy. Yeah. That's a trip. But while you got the stage theatrics, that got a lot of attention. The band was legit musically, yet that was often overlooked. Radio didn't share the enthusiasm that the underground press had with the band. Why do you think that was?
I think it's kind of normal. It happens to all bands. I mean, whether it be Kiss or whether it be any band that has a lot of theatrics, a lot of people will immediately assume that the theatrics are overshadowing the musicianship. It's just the way it is. I think it's something that, maybe takes time to prove otherwise. And maybe we didn't have enough time to prove that otherwise because we only made a few records. You know what I mean? But I think it was proven in a way. Because I think even after I left the band, the Plasmatics went on to make some really good records. That Coup d'etat record I think is a really good record. But again, that's not the same band. It's there were different musicians brought in. It's a whole different thing. And it wasn't the original The Plasmatics as I see it.
Talking with John Bouvoir, whose book, Bet My Soul on Rock and Roll, Diary of a Black Punk Icon, is out right now. Eventually, your run in the Plasmatics ended, and you write, quote, "The writing was on the wall. Between the bad contract and some other occurrences, including an evening out with David Lee Roth and some good advice, time was up," end quote. Now, you mentioned David Lee Roth. That catches my attention because I'm a huge Van Halen fan.
But people have to read the book to find out.
Yeah.
I can't tell them all over the.
No, you met so many famous people that you met. That's another great part of the gig, right? Is all these people that you get to meet that you idolized growing up, or you got the poster on the wall of Kiss and you end up meeting Paul Stanley. I want to ask you about that. Paul Stanley, he said the first time he met you, the room lit up.
That's an honor. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because I feel the same of him. You know what I mean? It was like because I grew up, he was my idol, and Kiss, I just loved that band. And so all of a sudden even though you found, once you got into the Plasmatics, like I said, you ended up meeting a lot of people. So this became more not expected, but you knew eventually you'd run into different people. But I remember I ran into him in a club, kind of a club that celebrities hung out in. I think it was Heartbreak was the name of it. And it was neat. And it was just actors and, rock stars, different people just go hang in. And they play old Motown and things like that. And, that's it. From there, we just ran into each other. Hey, you're John from the Plasmatics. I said, hey, you're Paul from Kiss. And from there, we became friends. And the rest is history and in the book.
Yeah. I love that you didn't recognize him because at that time, they were still wearing the makeup. So
That's right. Exactly. That's right. Exactly.
You and Paul wrote some great Kiss songs together, including Thrills in the Night from the 1984 album Animalize, and one of my favorite Kiss 80s era songs, Who Wants to Be Lonely. That's an underrated Kiss hit. You don't hear it that much. It doesn't show up on the best ofs, but I love that song. They made a video for it. Paul's wearing, yeah. Paul was wearing like the bright pink and the mid 80s. You really had to have that look, and Paul had it. Can you share some stories of writing music with Paul? I mean, this was a crucial time period for Paul because he's working hard to keep Kiss on the charts. What do you remember about those days?
Yeah, that's well put, what you're saying. He was working hard to keep Kiss rocking because he was very studious, very organized about the whole thing. It was fun. We actually didn't write anything for quite a while, at first. It was just a friendship and, it was weird. But I'd still go to, not weird, it was just a friendship. It's weird that we never actually did anything at the beginning, but that just wasn't what we had in mind. We just had a lot of similar traits and things. They're like brothers from another mother. It's kind of weird. Like he wrote, black and white twins in a very strange way, just things that we had in common that we'd say, what? Why did you really wearing that? I'm wearing the same thing. Or, it was just really weird. So that relationship would just, blossomed like that. And from there, one day we ended up writing a song together, singing in his apartment. And from there, we always enjoyed writing. And I'll speak for myself. I always enjoyed writing with him. And I think the same. And we, yeah, we wrote a lot of good things. And it's funny you mentioned that, because just the past few days I've been kind of going through old tapes and boxes of stuff that I had sitting in a locker. And I actually found tapes of Paul and I writing, which
really?
reminded me personally of how we wrote. Because people ask me that, and I don't remember exactly sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm like sitting, how did we write that song? Because I just can't remember. And so I'm listening to this tape, and it's got me playing keyboards, Paul playing guitar, and us writing the song. And I'm like sitting like, I don't remember ever playing keyboards, writing a song with Paul.
That's why. Well, I'm sure he'd love to hear those tapes too. He'd probably get a.
I'm sure he would. Yeah. It's funny. It's like, but anyways, it's and even listening to that, we had just a real symbiotic kind of writing relationship. It was fun. We both like Motown and old, things. And I think it's something that kind of stays in our mind. And we end up combining certain grooves with different kinds of influences vocally. And, and Paul, I don't know if you know, he's a great soul singer. He's got that record that just came out.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, of course. Then yeah, he's just put that new album out. He's got a rich history in music. And then he's been talking about how he's put in a little of the Motown feel into some of the classic Kiss songs. And when he explains it to you, and then you listen back to those songs, you say, oh my God, yeah, you're right. That's it. Songs here and there, he'd put a little like, oh, you know what? Shout It Out Loud, I think, was inspired by a Motown song. And I can't recall which one, but then it becomes a Kiss song, though. It's really cool.
That's right. Because, and that goes to another point that people ask me about. Oh, you work in so many different genres. How can you go rock and in 1 minute you have an NSYNC hit and then you have something completely different, But it's because to me a good song's a good song. So that's a perfect example that a good melody that worked in a Motown song could be a Kiss song, and you would never think it. You know what I mean? It's the same with there are people who use a lot of things from ABBA or from this or from that. You'd be surprised what songwriters and producers incorporate into their music at times, because for a lot of musicians it takes a long time to have success. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So in all that time that you're waiting to have success, you get to study a lot of music, and a lot of times, or if you have parents that really kind of influence you, played things around the house all the time, played 80s hair music or did this or did that, usually that kind of sticks with you too. And then when it comes to songwriting, you don't even think about it. It just comes in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that too. Do you hear it in your head? You hear a song in your head and then you got to put it down on tape?
Yeah, that happens a lot to me. So, I mean, that's I guess the beauty of these iPhones. For the past few albums, I'd say, that's what I do. I just, I walk around. It can happen anytime. I think a couple of nights ago it happened where all of a sudden I was just walking. I was walking my dog or something. And all of a sudden 2 song ideas came in. Boom. So I just immediately just put it in there, and I just wrote, JB song idea 1, JB song idea 2. And then I'll go back to it and see what it is and try to make more sense of it when the time is right.
Now, by the way, I'm going to clarify, Shout It Out Loud. I'm just doing a quick Google search here. Paul said 4 tops. He says, this is an interview with Brave Words, and he says, that's Levi singing lead and the tops answering him. That was his quote about shout it out loud. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
I see what he's getting at, because it's shout it out now, do with the answer.
Yeah.
It sounds like something like 4 Tops would do. They'd have the background vocals do a certain part, and then all of a sudden the lead vocalist would come back with an answer. See, that's a perfect example.
But again, and then it becomes a Kiss song. It sounds like Kiss. So have you ever had a song where it comes out exactly as you heard it in your head? Or does that happen all the time? Or
it happens a lot of times. It usually does, because I usually go by that map that's in my head. So if I hear, unless I get together with a different production team and I'm going there with an open slate on purpose, like say, oh, I've got an idea, but I don't want to be locked into what I'm hearing in my head. So let's see what you guys come up with, or let's see what we can do with this. And I just let it be open. But a lot of times, if I just hear a song, let's say for an album of mine, it'll all just come in. And as I'm doing the song, and I could be walking, whatever. I love boats, so I'm always at the marina. So I've got a boat there, and I walk around that marina, and I'll just late at night, and I'll just sing these parts. And as I put the melody down, I'll put the drum beat down, then I'll hum the bass line, then I'll hum the guitar line, and I'll hum string lines. I'll pretty much, by the time I'm done humming, I have the whole arrangement in there.
That is awesome. What about lyrics? Do lyrics come last?
No, that comes last for me.
Yeah.
For me. Not everybody's like that. I know a lot of people will write a lyric first and write a song around that, right. But that's just not my style. With me, I'll do what I just said to you. I'll have the whole song all together. Then once I have that, I'll usually record that. And once that's recorded, at least in a demo form, or at least basic enough where I can sing to it, then I'll do usually one pass at a vocal melody. And usually I'd say, no exaggeration, probably 6 out of 10 times, that first take and pass that I do of that vocal melody usually ends up being the actual vocal melody for that song. Precisely.
I'm fascinated by that stuff. I was listening to Beau Hill, the producer who produced a lot of the great 80s albums from Rat. I know. You know Beau Hill? Okay.
Yeah.
I was listening to him on a podcast, and he was talking about there was a Third Eye Blind album in the 90s that was huge. It was like tons of hit singles. And he said, you know what? He goes, you know what I realized after listening back to that? He said within the first 15 seconds of all of those hit singles, they got to the hook. They got within 15 seconds. Sometimes there's a formula there. If you want to get a song on the radio, I guess you got to, but not everybody's going to write.
But I hear what you're saying. That's, I think this is something that happened more in the past, because I know exactly what you mean. And it was something, first of all, songs had to be, within the 3.5 minutes,
Right.
We went through that whole period until, Stairway to Heaven came along. But anyways, that was kind of, and there was a formula of, make sure you got to get to the chorus, immediately if you brought it into a producer or me as a producer too, the verse is too long, got to get to the chorus within the next, you know what I mean?
Right.
We would think more like that than I think it is now. Now is a strange time for music, I think, because if I listen to the radio, not talking about rock radio, we're just talking about, just pop radio. The music that I hear is all over the place. There's really no fixed, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
These songs start with choruses, start with verses. Some of them just a beat, some of them is something else completely, some of it's Arabic, some of it's, it's like,
well, I mean,
which
now
is interesting though.
It's interesting, but now you look at the rock charts and it's not the rock and roll that we listened to growing up.
Yeah, the rock chart, I haven't even looked. I mean, who's on the rock chart here? No.
Good question. Yeah. Well, here. Okay. So here's another question now. Is it worth, as an artist, would you put out a full album because the streaming now is the big thing, because the artists don't make as much money from streaming. So some artists say, you know what, this is what I love to do and I want to create. I'm going to keep making music like a Springsteen or, Paul Stanley. He just put out his Motown record. How do you feel about that? Because Gene Simmons says, why bother? We're not going to make money off of it.
It's an interesting, it depends on whose perspective. Okay. Because I've heard different perspectives on what you just said. Okay, I don't remember if it was Aerosmith or another bigger band. Maybe it probably wasn't Aerosmith. But let's say, who was it? It was Stone, somebody, and a very big band. And they ended up saying, why would I make another record? Now, for a band like that let's say has had some really classic records that are selling and selling and selling, for them to go make another record, they feel can be a negative. Because if already they're selling out stadiums because of the music they have, and then all of a sudden they put themselves back out there on the competition block by releasing a new album. If, God forbid, people put that album down or it doesn't chart or it doesn't do that, all of a sudden their value will go down.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So for them, it makes no sense to do it. Somebody like Paul, Kiss is successful. They're doing everything they need to do. They probably won't make any more records. And so he's doing everything that he'd want to dream of doing with Kiss. So it's time for him to be able to expand, spread his wings, and release something that is his love, which is a passion. Now, yeah, of course, he'd want a hit. We all want hits, always. You know what I mean? And when you don't have a hit, you think that it's going to, devalue you. But it's hard for, but even as a friend, it's hard for Paul to get devalued by that record, even if it doesn't do what he wants him to do, because Kiss is Kiss. You just can't, it's undeniable. So, and the record that he made is great. So, so it's a great record. So it doesn't matter what it does. So in other words, some people it's just a matter of expression. And what you said about the singles and albums, it's a question I ask myself now because I'm intending on releasing new music soon. And I'm wondering the same thing, whether, sometimes you want to release an album because you'll get reviews with it, from magazines, Grammy nominated. There are a lot of things you could do with an album that's hard to do with just a single besides, have a hit. But to tell you the truth, I think it's almost too much for people these days to have full albums out. It almost seems, maybe not the rock aficionados, but I mean, just in general.
Yeah, maybe better to do one song at a time and do it that
Put
way.
all your energies into that. Also, because I think that the music will get probably more attention that way. Because, when you put out an album, it gets reviewed, everybody buys it, or whoever's going to buy it does it, blah, 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 blah. You release one single off that record, and the other songs, you might go to 2-3 singles. Most rock bands won't, and that's it. And then the record's over, and already the magazines are like, okay, well, what's the next, where's the next album?
Yeah, it's really got to be hard to grab and keep anybody's attention nowadays because there's so many options.
That's what I mean, because there are 10, 11 great songs on that record, but nobody's going to really know, that's one point of view. I mean, then again, from a pure rock point of view, what I just said is useless. It's not useless. But what I mean is that a rock point of view, a rock fan wants to have a rock album from their favorite band. You know what I mean? And they're looking forward to what the next 11 songs are that band is going to, give them. And that's so you have such different audiences that it's hard sometimes to try to navigate and balance where you want to be. You know what I mean? It's a little confusing sometimes.
Merchandising is another big thing nowadays to recoup the money that's lost from streaming. And did you have a lot of merch back in those days? Because merchandising didn't really...
Massive amount.
Okay.
Massive amount. It was massive. Matter of fact, you mentioned David Lee Roth at the time. That's right. David was the one who commented when he came to the show and he saw me and took me out. And he said, wow, you guys must be making a fortune in merch.
Oh, so you really capitalized. Yeah, because merchandising didn't really kick in. Because I was just interviewing an author of a book on Uriah Heep. And Uriah Heep, when they were touring, they no merchandise. There was no T-shirts.
Oh, that's crazy.
And so,
but bands like the Plasmatics, Van Halen too. No, they had merchandise because he was telling me back then. I remember him coming to that show. It was like Perkins Palace or Santa Monica Civic, and he was telling me, because our merchandising alone, we're making so much money. We have whole hotel room floors and this and that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have any hotel room floors.
Yeah, Dave's a character, man. Dave is a character.
I haven't seen or spoken to him in years. I'd love to. I mean, I'm talking years, probably 20, 30 years, more, which is crazy. I saw the Van Halen guys because I toured with Van Halen in Europe. It was my band Crown of Thorns, Van Halen, and Bon Jovi.
Yep, mid-90s.
That's right. Yeah, so that was great, but I didn't see David, and I think of him often. A great guy, and he was a lot of fun, and, we really hit it off, Few people like that I haven't seen. Rob Halford, I had the same situation with him. I haven't seen him in years, and just a few, really great guys.
Do you still keep in touch with
Paul? I'm glad to see us still out there.
Do you still talk to Paul? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, we spoke. Yeah, we speak often.
That's cool. Let's get to your 1986 solo single, Feel the Heat, because it becomes a hit, top 10 across Europe and Australia, Billboard Hot 100 single. The album drums along the Mohawk on the Billboard 200 charts. The song was on the radio, MTV, movie theaters, thanks to Sylvester Stallone. What a thrill that must have been. How did Stallone get involved with that?
There's a very interesting story on how he got involved, and it includes Warner Pictures Studio, where he was doing the editing for the film Cobra, and my video was being edited there. So from there, they have to read the book. But it gets into the details on how that happened. It was amazing. I was like, I can't believe it. It was just like a very interesting couple of years because I went from like really being discouraged and things being really tough. I just could not get a solo deal. Then all of a sudden I got Richard Branson, I've got Columbia, I've got Stallone. It's like, and this is all happening within like a 12-month period. It's crazy. Definitely a thrill.
Did you enjoy making videos?
Not always, I have to say, because, especially younger or whatever, I was always really concerned with the way I looked. I never thought it was good enough, blah, blah, blah. Oh, God, I don't like that angle. Oh, God. So then I dreaded going into editing rooms, because people would see one shot of you and say, that's great. I'd go, oh, God, that looks terrible. You know what I mean? And then you'd go through that kind of stuff, which I always found to be painful, to be honest. So, when the video is finished and it ends up looking great and, it's a great director and you're happy with the results, that's one thing. But they're always, they can be a bit difficult to make.
You did allude to, and I want to ask you, because you've got quite a career as a producer, the Ramones. Among the songs you produced, Pet Sematary, one of my favorite Ramones songs, the title track to Stephen King's movie from 1989, highest charting song of the band's career. A lot of time and work went into that. The band later said they ended up spending more than twice the cost of the first album on this one song. How did the song come together? They came to you with a basic idea, right?
Yeah, they came with the basic idea. We went in. I brought in some people that I wanted to use as far as an engineer, Fernando Kroll, who I'd worked with before, who actually did a very nice article about a precise article in a magazine called Sound on Sound. It's online, actually.
Okay.
And it really describes in detail everything about the recording of that record, down to each microphone. So that's probably, they could do that. Or in the book, I get pretty detailed about it as well. But it was a long process. It was an important song, and for me as a producer, it was an important song. So I just pulled out all the stops, used the best studios, the best people I knew, and to make sure that we got something that everybody, the record company, the band, and the management were happy with.
Did you get along with the guys well?
We got along fine. It was like always making records are a little difficult sometimes, just because, different members have different opinions. They want different things, and you're kind of like the go-between for everything somewhat. So, so you have to be able to take a little beating here and there. But besides that, since we knew each other before we got into production and we were all going for the same thing. So, yeah. And I'm pretty, when I produce a band, I don't want to say I'm submissive, but I realize my role as a fifth member of the band and to enhance what it is that they're doing. So I think with that attitude, it allows them to give you a little bit of leeway too, to try some things, and everybody was happy at the end. And they turned out, it was a good album.
There's a chapter in the book about your time living in Los Angeles. You lived in LA for a while, and you did say you had a lot of fun there, but after a while, it left you feeling empty. You called it a morbid life of decadence in Hollywood. Was there a specific moment when you said, that's it, it's time for me to get out of here?
Yeah, I think it was, when you say a moment, it was almost like a little time period. It was like, first of all, it wasn't great. We had lost the deal, with Interscope, which was bad. Now we realized our record wasn't coming out. And that was a big blow, a really big blow, because I knew this was a major, major opportunity for me. The record was great. And I knew if that thing hit MTV and everything else, it would have just skyrocketed. And just when that happened, I kind of said, that's it, I'm done. Besides other things in LA, which are explained in the book, I just packed my stuff and, got a moving company and I moved to Key West without even telling anybody. I remember my guitar player called me and saying, Voodoo, I went to your house, you weren't there.
Really?
Yeah, I'm serious. Voodoo. That's Mickey Free. It's funny. He said, Voodoo, I went to your house, you weren't there, where are you? I said, I'm in Key West.
Oh my God.
It was time. I just felt like it was time. It was the right move to get out of there at that time. LA can get overwhelming, and if you're not careful, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble over there. As you've seen many rock and rollers attest to.
I know. But eventually, man, things work out for you. You found true love, moved to Florida. Suzanne, right? That's your wife?
Yep.
Life is good for John Bouvoir.
I cannot complain. Life is good. There's no doubt. There's no doubt in comparison to what it could be.
Bet My Soul on Rock and Roll, Diary of a Black Punk Icon. It is out now through Chicago Review Press. It's available wherever books are sold. John, you have a website you want to let people know about, your official website and social media pages?
Yes. My website is jeanbouvoir.com. So that's www.jean, Jean, for people who don't know, Jean and Beauvoir, Beauv like Victor, OIR. Beauvoir.com. And everything's posted there or on Facebook or Instagram. Twitter too now, just to, let people know what's going on. But definitely, we're also selling autographed copies, personalized, which you can order directly from the website.
I'll put the link up to your website on the show notes page too. So if anybody, you want to go to the show notes page, click on the link and that's how you'll find John there. So, all right. So we may have an album from you in the future.
Yes. I'm starting to work on some new music now. I've got a couple of things. I just finished two really good recordings with a German band called Lustfinger. And they're a very well-known German band. They were the premier punk band, or one of the premier punk bands from Germany for a long time. And they were just making their 40th anniversary album. So I got a call from them out of nowhere saying, hey, we'd love to have, some contributions from you if you'd be interested. So they sent me a couple of songs. I heard a ballad that they sent me that was just fantastic. And I just said, let's do a German-English duet. And so we did it. So we have one German-English duet, and we also did a new version, which they play brilliantly, of Bonzo Goes to Bitburg. And so basically they did all the music and background vocals, and I did the lead vocal on that track. So that's two things that will come out soon, I think within the next couple of months. Plus I have a couple of songs on the Lordi album, the new Lordi album. You familiar with Lordi?
Yes.
Lordi from Europe. They dress up as monsters and a fantastic band. Anyways, they have not one album. They just broke the world record by releasing 7 albums simultaneously.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, 7 albums at the same time. And so basically I have 2 songs on one of those albums, and one of them is co-written with Paul Stanley. It's called Like a Bee to the Honey. Yep. Like
a Bee to the Honey. And these 2 songs are out now.
Yeah, they're out now. As a matter of fact, there's a video. If you look up Lordi, like a Bee to the Honey, there's a cool animated video, and it was their last single actually, but it's also going to be on the album. So it really did very well in Europe so far. And then I'm starting to look at stuff for a new record myself, and I'm starting to jot down ideas right now. So hopefully in not too long, either like we talked about, either a single first or an album. But in any case, the single will come first. But so I'm just kind of getting all that together.
John Bouvoir, thanks so much, man.
Thanks a lot.
That'll do it for this episode of the Booked on Rock podcast. Thanks so much for listening. As always, I'm Eric Senich. Join me again next time for another brand new episode of Booked on Rock.
That's it. It's in the books.